Уважаемые дамы и господа, президент
Ladies and
Российской
gentlemen, the
Федерации,
President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin,
председатель Китайской Народной
the
Республики,
President of the Chinese People's Republic,
президент
Xi
Республики
Jinping,
Болгарии,
the President of the Republic of Bulgaria, Rumen Radev, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovakia, Peter Pellegrini, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, and the moderator of the plenary session, Sophie Shevardnadze.
Всем добрый день, я Софи Шеварднадзе. Я очень рада, что я буду сегодня.
Good afternoon. I'm Sophie Shevardnadze. I'm very pleased to be the moderator of today's plenary because the St. Petersburg Forum is a unique platform where we see meetings of businessmen, officials, leaders, and that kind of group is really unprecedented. You can see it anywhere in the world. So each year we meet here in order to understand how to move forward. I was able to talk to the speakers before this plenary, and I believe they want a frank discussion. And I think that is exactly what will happen. So the heads of state will speak. Vladimir Putin is the first to speak.
Good afternoon, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to welcome to Russia the heads of state and government, all the participants of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I'm grateful to our guests for your attention and friendly attitude towards Russia, for your willingness to work together and engage in business cooperation. Well, of course, business leaders know that this cooperation is based on pragmatism and due regard for the interests of one another, as well as frankness and clear-cut positions. I'd like to take this opportunity of being here at the platform of St. Petersburg Economic Forum, not just to talk about the goals that we set for ourselves in Russia, but I will also talk about our views on the world economic system. It's not an abstract discussion for us. The development of Russia, due to its scale, history, culture, its human potential, as well as economic opportunities, cannot be built outside the global context without aligning the internal, national, and world agenda. What is the current state of affairs and our assessment thereof? Formally, recently, the growth of global economy, and I think we're going to concentrate on that primarily because this is an economic forum after all. So formally, the growth rate of global economy is positive. In 2011-2018, on average, it stood at 2.8% yearly. Recently, a little more than 3%. But according to our view, and we leaders of state have to frankly recognize that despite this growth rate, the current model of economic relations is unfortunately in crisis mode, and this crisis is of a comprehensive nature. Problems here have been accumulating over the recent decades, and these issues are of a far greater scale and magnitude than we thought before. After the end of the Cold War, globalization, including new markets, and the architecture of the world economy changed drastically. The dominating development model was based on the Western liberal tradition. We would call it the Euro-Atlantic model, and it put forth a claim not just at a global but at a universal role. And the main driver of the new globalization paradigm was the world trade. Since 1991 up until 2007, trade grew twice as fast as the world GDP. But that is understandable because new markets were involved in this system. The former Soviet Union was flooded by new goods. But historically, this period was quite short-lived. Subsequently, we saw the world crisis of 2008 and 2009. It brought to the foreground the imbalances and disproportions, aggravating them, and it also demonstrated that the mechanism for global growth started to fail. Of course, the world community did its home assignment, correcting the mistakes, but maybe we didn't have the will or the courage to look the truth squarely in the face and to make the necessary conclusions. The simplistic approach set in. Allegedly, the model of global development was viable and nothing had to be changed. It was sufficient, as some thought back then, to remove the symptoms and to adjust the rules and world economic and financial institutions. There were a lot of hopes and positive expectations floating around, but they vanished quite fast. The quantitative easing, as well as other measures, didn't address the issue. In essence, only pushed it into the future. I know that, in particular here, there were discussions raging on quantitative easing, and the Russian leadership, the Russian government, the administration discuss these issues and have debates all the time. At the same time, let me cite some data from the World Bank and the IMF. Before 2008-2009 crisis, the ratio of the world trade and trades and services to global GDP was growing rapidly, but now the trend is the obverse, and there is no growth anymore. And the ratio which we saw before 2008 did not recover. As a matter of fact, global trade is no longer the unconditional driver of the world economy. The cutting-edge technologies were supposed to become the new driver, but so far this new mechanism is still being fine-tuned and has not yet reached full capacity. Moreover, the world economy has entered the period of trade wars and a growing protectionism, both direct protectionism and the hidden one. What are the sources of this crisis in international economic relations? What undermines the trust between the participants of the world economy? I believe the main reason is that the globalization model, which was put forth at the end of the 20th century, is less and less relevant to the emerging new economic reality. Over the last 3 decades, the share of developed countries in the global GDP in PPP decreased from 58% to 40%. In particular, the share of the G7 dropped from 46 to 30%. On the contrary, the share of developing countries, emerging markets, is growing. Such a new advent of new economies that have their own interests, their own development platforms, their own attitudes towards globalization and regional integration processes. All of that aligns not that well with the conceptions that until recently seemed unwavering. The old stereotypes put the Western countries into an exceptional condition. They gave them an advantage as well as a great rent, sort of prefiguring their leadership, whereas all the other countries only had to follow in their wake. Of course, a lot was happening to the tune of all this talk about equality, but I'm going to talk about that later. When this comfortable system started to erode, when new competitors and rivals arrived, the ambitions, their willingness to preserve their dominance came to the foreground. In the past, these countries preached the freedom of trade and fair and open competition, but right now they decided to switch to the rhetoric of trade wars and sanctions and quite overt economic pressure with wringing hands, intimidation, and removing the competitors. These are non-market methods. I'm going to cite but a couple of examples, which we remember all too well. Nord Stream 2, for instance. I saw our partners, not just from Russia, but also from Europe, This project was designed to raise the energy security of Europe, to create new jobs. It is fully in compliance with the national interests of all the participants, both Europeans and Russia. If it were not the case, then our European friends would never have chosen to participate, because no one could be dragged to this project. They came to us because they were interested in this project. But this does not fit the logic or the interest of those who have grown accustomed to the exclusivity and all permissiveness within the framework of the current universalist model. They believe that others have to pay their bills, and that's why this project has been torpedoed and hindered. Unfortunately, these destructive practices has afflicted not just the traditional markets, the energy, the commodity markets, trade markets, but it has been transplanted to new industries. Let's remember Huawei, which has not just been put aside. There are unceremonious attempts at pushing Huawei from the global market. Some call it the first technological war of the new digital era. It would seem that the digital transformation, new technologies that transform industries, new professions are supposed to open up new horizons for everyone who is open to changes, but unfortunately new barriers are constructed here too. There are direct restrictions on the purchase of high technology assets, and sometimes there are restrictions on admission of foreign students in education as far as certain specialities being concerned. However surprising that is, it is a fact. This monopoly always presupposes that the income is being concentrated in the hands of a few at the expense of others. That is why there are attempts at monopolizing the technological wave to restrict access to its fruits, and this results a new level of global inequality between countries and regions and within countries. And as we understand, this is the greatest source of instability. And this is not just about the level of income or material inequality. This is about the difference and opportunities people have. As a matter of fact, there is an attempt to build two worlds between which the chasm is only going to grow. One part has access to cutting-edge education, healthcare, and technologies. Others have no prospects. They do not even have a chance to get away from poverty. Others are simply teetering on the brink of survival. There are more than 800 million people in the world who do not have access to potable water. Around 11% of our population of the planet are malnourished. And if the system is built on inequality, it's never going to be sustainable or balanced. The crisis is further aggravated by environmental and climate challenges that directly threaten the social and economic welfare of mankind. Climate and the environment have become the objective factor of world development. It is a problem that can bring about large-scale shocks, a surge in migration which is not going to be controlled, a greater instability, and the undermining of security in the key regions of the world at the same time. The risk is that in spite of these challenges, we will see attempts at even using these factors for unfair competition. Ladies and gentlemen, we see two extremities, two scenarios of how the world is going to be developing. The first is the transformation of the universalist globalization model, when it will turn into parody, a caricature of itself, when international law is going to be supplanted by laws, administrative and court decisions of one country or a group of influential countries. Unfortunately, that is the approach the US is pursuing right now, trying to extend its jurisdiction in the world. Incidentally, I spoke about that 20 years ago. This certainly goes contrary to the logic of normal interstate cooperation and the emerging realities of a complex multipolar world. But the most important thing is that it is not aligned with the future. And the second scenario is the fragmentation of global economic space, the politics of economic egotism, and using force to push one's interests forward. It is going to be sort of an all-out war when everyone is against everyone. What are the solutions to that? Not utopic, not ephemeral solutions, but realistic ones. It is evident that to arrive at a sustainable and just development model, what we'll need is not just clear-cut agreements. They have to be observed by everyone. But I'm confident that a talk about such world order is only going to be wishful thinking if we do not get back to the center of this discussion such notions as sovereignty and the right of every country to their own development path, as well as universal responsibility, not just for our sustainable development, but for the sustainable development of everyone. What should be the object of such regulation? Certainly, no one should try to impose on others a single right canon. No, we have to harmonize our national economic interests. Interaction, competition, and interaction between countries with their different development models, their characteristics and interests, these have to be the principles that have to be elaborated in a democratic and open fashion. Based on that, we have to adapt the world trade to these new realities, and the WTO has to be more efficient. We should not break the old mechanisms. We have to give new substance to the existing international institutions. And we also have to take into account the interests of developing countries, and in reality, not just in words, especially those countries that are trying to modernize their industry, their agriculture, and the social sphere. These are equal developments. And I suggest that we should think about an open database with the best practices and development projects. Russia is willing to place its successful cases in social and demographic and economic field in this database, and we invite other countries and international organizations to join this initiative. As far as finance is concerned, the most global institutions in this field were established back 75 years ago as part of the Bretton Woods system. It was replaced in the 70s by the Jamaica currency system. It reaffirmed the priority of dollar, but it didn't address the main issues, mainly the balance of currency relations and the trade exchange. Over these years, new economic centers have emerged, regional currencies have become stronger, the balance of interests and forces has become different. Of course, this requires an adaptation of international financial institutions. The role of dollar has to be revisited. It used to be the world reserve currency, but right now it has turned into a tool of the issuing country that it used to pressure the rest of the world. And I think that is the error of the financial authorities and political authorities, because they erode their own advantage that they got when the Bretton Woods system was established, because trust in dollar is falling. Moreover, the agenda of technological development has to bring countries together, not set them apart. For that, we need principles of fair interaction in such areas as high technology, education, the transfer of technology, new digital economy, and global information space. Of course, it is going to be difficult to build such a harmonious system, but that is the best recipe to rebuild mutual trust. We have no other way forward. We've got to work together to that end, realizing the scale, the magnitude of global challenges of the new era and our responsibility for tomorrow. For that, we need the potential of the UN, which is unique in terms of its representation. Its economic institutions have to be reinforced, and we have to use new formats such as the G20 more efficiently. So far, such a compendium of rules is not there. And before that happens, we've got to look at the situation and take into account the realities. As a first step, using diplomatic terms, we suggest that we should sort of demilitarize the key sectors of global economy and trade. We've got to protect against trade and sanction wars the supplies of first need supplies, medicines, medical equipment. that have to be protected. Thank you very much for your understanding. And apart from that, the utility systems and energy systems have to be protected because they help decrease the burden on the environment and climate. I refer first and foremost to the industries that are of critical importance for the health and life of millions, billions of people on our planet. Colleagues, the current trends in the world tell us that the role of the country, its sovereignty, its place, and the current conditions are determined by a number of key factors. First, the ability to ensure the security and safety of its citizens, the capacity to protect national identity and make a contribution to world culture. And there are other three factors, at least, that I believe are of the utmost, of paramount importance. Let me dwell on them a little. First is the welfare and income of the people. They have to have a chance to open up their talents. The second one is the sensitiveness of countries and societies to large-scale technological changes, and next, entrepreneurial initiatives. Let me start with the first one. Right now, GDP per capita in Russia is around $30,000 in PPP, at the same level as Southern and Eastern Europe. In the coming years, we'd like to make it not just into the 5 biggest world economies. This is not an end in itself, it is but a means. We have to reach the middle European level in all the main parameters that reflects the quality of life and welfare of people. And based on that, we have formulated our national goals in raising and boosting our economy and incomes of our citizens, decreasing poverty, raising life expectancy, developing healthcare and education, and protecting the environment. The national projects that we are implementing pursue these goals. The second direction we pursue is advanced technological development. We have colossal opportunities, and we can be the first that use new technologies and convert them into true breakthrough. According to the experts, in the coming decade, an additional boost to the world GDP thanks to the implementation of AI is going to stand at 1.2% on a yearly basis, which is twice as much as the influence that we saw thanks to the information technologies at the beginning of the 21st century. The world market of products that use AI by 2024 will have grown 17-fold and will be at around $500 billion. As all the other leading countries in the world, Russia has drafted a national strategy for the development of technology in AI. It has been developed by the government with the participation of high technology companies of Russia. The decree is going to be signed very soon, and the detailed step-by-step approach has been integrated into the national program entitled The Digital Economy. Russia has good personnel, a scientific groundwork, and very good groundwork for cutting-edge technological solutions. And this is not limited to AI. There are other technologies that unite different industries. That is why I invite Russian companies, state-run companies, and private companies to become our partners in developing scientific avenues that unite different avenues. I refer to AI, digital technologies, new materials, genome technologies for medicine, agriculture, and industry, portable sources of energy, new technologies for the transfer and storage of energy. And this partnership has to bring about a breakthrough as well as commercialization of new products and services in internal markets and in external markets. For the government, it is a chance to create a sovereign groundwork for companies. It is a chance to break through into the new technological era. Just a week ago, we talked about that at a special session of the government, and we are going to strike agreements with Sberbank, Rostec, Rosatom, Russian Railways, Rostelecom. The package of documents has already been drafted, and I would like to invite our leading energy companies to join the field. Gazprom, Rosneft, Rosseti, and Transneft. I would like to instruct the government to organize this work. How is the cooperation between the government and large companies going to be built? As part of these partnership agreements, companies will invest into R&D, into centers of excellences, and supporting startups, and preparing scientific, managerial, engineering personnel, and inviting specialists from abroad. The government, in its turn, is going to provide financial and tax incentives. It's going to stimulate the demand for Russian high technology product through procurement in particular. In other words, we'll have to make the market for that. Maybe our Chinese friends are going to buy something from new products and services that we will offer. We'll have to fine-tune the system for technical standardization and regulation, and we'll sort of set up experimental legal regimes to that end. An adequate and responsive legal environment is key for new industries, and it takes a lot of work to build. There are many sensitive issues in terms of security and the interests of the citizens and society, but we've got to accelerate these decisions that, I would like to invite my colleagues from the government and experts and the business community to come up with such efficient mechanisms. For new industries, we will need specialists with new knowledge, and that is why we have to transform our education. In August in Kazan, as you know, we're going to host the World Cup in World Skills. At the Russian initiative, it is going to organize competitions on competences of tomorrow in machine education, machine learning, big data, composite materials, and quantum technologies. I'd like to wish our team and all the participants success. I'd like to say that we've built a platform, Russia, the country of opportunities, that seeks to develop professional qualities, personal qualities. There are different Olympic Games and competitions for school children, for young people of different age, not just from Russia, but from others. And this project has involved more than 1,600,000 people in 2018, 2019. The system is going to be promoted and made more transparent and efficient, because the more courageous and talented people we see in business and science, state management and social sphere, the more successful we will be in addressing the goals in development, and the greater is our global competition going to be. Apart from that, the third factor of competitiveness of the country is the convenient, amenable business environment. And we are trying to do everything in our power to achieve just that. We have caught up with other countries, or even got ahead of them, the countries with long-standing business traditions. We see fair competition and rivalry among different regions. Our management teams have become better, and there is a good incentive for such changes. That is the national ranking of investment climate in Russian regions. As is tradition, at St. Petersburg, I'd like to name and congratulate the leading regions of 2019, Moscow, Tatarstan, Tyumen, and Kaluga region, and St. Petersburg. I would like to applaud them as well. As far as the dynamics for increasing and improving the investment climate is concerned, the leaders are such regions as Yakutia, Primorsky Krai, Samara region, Crimea, Northern Ossetia, Perm Krai, Nizhny Novgorod region, Udmurtia, Ivanovsk, and Novgorodsk regions. And I'd like to avail myself of the opportunity to ask the heads of the region and my representatives in federal districts to intensify this work to attract private capital, international projects, and other development projects, in particular, taking the opportunity of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. There are some positive changes in business climate and administrative procedures, but there are acute problems that still persist. I refer to the archaic and excessive nature of oversight. Sometimes there are unjustified or illegal incursions of law enforcement agencies into the business environment and into how companies are working. This year, we have launched the most drastic reform post-Soviet in state oversight and control. Starting from January the 1st, 2021, the old normative framework will cease to apply the obsolete ones, and it is going to be replaced with the clear-cut system of requirements. The powers of state authorities are not going to be overlapping, and there are going to be clear-cut criteria for extraordinary inspections. Risk-oriented approach is going to be enshrined, and a new information service is going to be launched, and it'll allow us to swiftly respond to any discrepancies. Now, as far as business and law enforcement agencies relation is concerned, we are going to liberalize further our legislation. The property rights are going to be guaranteed, and will make sure that no abuse is possible, that no pressure on the business is possible, and power structure, siloviki, and court system are going to be purged from those people who abuse the system. And of course, we're going to raise the transparency of business environment. This year, we're going to launch the new digital platform, the so-called digital ombudsman, that is going to allow entrepreneurs to protect themselves against illegal actions from law enforcement agencies. This is going to build trust between society, business, and the state. And of course, we have to transform the state management system based on digital technologies. We have to drastically raise the efficiency of state governance. The speed and quality of decisions we make have to be improved, and I'd like the government to come up with a concrete plan to that end, together with the heads of regions. Colleagues, Russia has launched on many occasions large-scale development projects that have symbolized our dynamic changes in the south of Russia, in the Russian Far East, and the Arctic. Right now, we have to give thought to improving the situation in vast regions in central and eastern Siberia. We have to calculate, we have to agree upon development plans. This is a macro region that concentrates very rich natural resources. It accounts for around 1/4 of our forests, half of coal, copper, big deposits of copper and nickel, large energy reserves. Apart from that, it has huge opportunities for the development of agriculture. In Minusinsk Valley, for instance, there are more than 300 sunny days a year, which gives us the chance to build an agricultural, an agro-industrial complex there. And Russian and foreign experts believe that this macro region could attract as much as 3 trillion rubles. With the help of the government, infrastructure, social structure can be built, residences can be built, and this is not going to be a source of commodities and raw materials. This is going to be a scientific and industrial center, a link between the European part of Russia and the Russian Far East, between the markets of China, the Asia Pacific, and Europe. It'll link Eastern Europe there, and it'll draw personnel there, highly competent ones. I'd like to ask the government to work with the expert community to come up with a plan to that end and to report on that this autumn. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia has started to implement strategic long-term programs that have global magnitude. The speed and scale of changes we see in the world are unprecedented. And in the nascent era, it is important for us to listen to one another, to hear one another, to band our efforts together to address common tasks we're up against. Russia is willing to live up to the challenges, and we invite you to high and wide and equal cooperation with all of you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Спасибо, Владимир Владимирович. Вы обозначили очень важные темы.
Thank you, Vladimir Vladimirovich. You have identified very important themes. Existing rules are something that everyone is unhappy about. Chairman Xi, it's now your turn to speak. Please. President Putin, distinguished colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's a great pleasure to be present here at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum at the invitation of President Putin. I would like to sincerely thank President Putin and our Russian friends for warm reception and hospitality. St. Petersburg is the sea capital of Russia and a world-renowned pearl of the Baltic Sea. Thanks to the 3 centuries of tradition and rapid development, this city shines both as a classic and as an elegant modern metropolis. And we admire this very much. Yesterday, after dinner, President Putin and I took a boat ride along the Neva. And he told me an interesting story about the history and culture of your country and this city that I greatly admired. The city over the free-flowing Neva, the city of our glorious neighbor. This song, played once by President Putin on the piano, really demonstrates that Petersburg has a very special place in the soul of the Russian people. St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, since its inception in 1997, has been developing and getting stronger and is becoming a unique platform for serious discussion for cooperation. This year, the theme of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum is shaping the agenda of sustainable development. This is consistent with the common concerns of the international community and is of great relevance today. The world today is going through unprecedented change, unprecedented in centuries. The rate of growth of the emerging markets and of the developing countries have been unprecedented. Unprecedented changes and sharp competition is taking place against the background of the new spiral in the scientific and technological revolution and transformation in industry. The global governance system and the global process are, as never before, out of proportion and inadequate. In a changing world, uniting the efforts of countries and mutually beneficial cooperation is the right path for all countries without exception. In the global dimension, sustainable development is the maximum common denominator of global cooperation. The United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda for the period up to 2030, in a spirit of harmonious coexistence of man and nature, taking into account the needs of today's generation and future generations, provides the agenda for growth in 3 interdependent areas: economic growth, social development, and the environment. This year we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Chinese People's Republic. As the biggest developing country and the responsible world power, China is firmly committed to its pledges for sustainable development, and China has earned recognition and respect for its successes. China attaches particular importance to the development of international cooperation in the area of sustainable development. This is demonstrated by my initiative proposed in 2013, One Belt, One Road, which is aimed at mutual benefit and comprehensive development. This initiative is in many ways consistent with the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development 2030 as regards its goals, principles, and ways of implementation. And it has earned admiration and support of the international community. In April, we held in China a successful second forum of One Belt, One Road, and the participants agreed on the high-quality implementation of Belt and Road based on the principle of common discussion, common implementation, and common use. In accordance with the concept of sustainability, openness, and accountability, this cooperation will be of high quality for the benefit of the welfare of the people and sustainable development. In shaping the global network of interconnectedness and partnership, we will effectively link Belt and Road with the Sustainable Development Agenda, and we will link together the economy, the society, and the environment in the interest of green, low carbon, and sustainable development. It is obvious that international cooperation requires trustful, sincere, and like-minded partners. For us, Russia is our biggest neighbor and a comprehensive strategic partner, and it is one of the most important and priority partners in cooperation in all areas. In the spirit of sustainable development, our 2 countries are actively cooperating in the sphere of renewable energy, and they regard innovation, digital economy, and electronic economy as the new drivers for cooperation. We have been working productively also in the use and protection of transboundary resources and also in transboundary conservation. President Putin and I agreed to link up the One Belt, One Road and the Eurasian Economic Union. The initiative of joint implementation of Belt and Road is also consistent with President Putin's idea of the Great Eurasian Partnership. They can definitely supplement each other, complement each other, and I am convinced that this will give a powerful impetus to regional economic integration in the interest of comprehensive sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, sustainable development is not only a natural but also an inevitable outcome of the development of productive forces and technological progress. This is indeed the aspiration of the vast majority of the world's countries. There is a proverb, if there's a will, there is a way. The aspiration of nations toward a better life cannot be stopped. We are ready with all our partners to translate words into practical action and together to open a new page in sustainable development. First of all, it's important through joint efforts to shape an open and diversified global economy by means of common implementation and common use. China will be consistent in expanding openness, in giving more access to its markets, and in creating a favorable business environment for honest competition. We will continue to firmly advocate economic globalization, to defend a multilateral trade system, to take steps in order to overcome the inequities in the development of the global economy. We want mutually beneficial cooperation on the principles of equality and mutual respect. Will strive to achieve a synergetic effect in the implementation of One Belt, One Road and of the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development 2030. We will develop the potential of the Assistance Fund for South-South Cooperation and the Fund for Peace and Development China-UN, and we will provide further opportunities for the developing countries. China is ready to share with all partners the technological inventions and know-how, in particular the 5G technology, and to create additional key advantages as well as to change the model of economic growth. Secondly, it is necessary to increase efforts in order to build a tolerant society of universal wealth, which puts the interests of humankind, the interests of human beings, as the first priority. Welfare of the people is the #1 task for any country, for any state. China continues to work in order to eliminate poverty so as to eliminate it in particular by 2020 in the rural areas. By the end of this year, we intend to create more than 11 million new jobs. We are directing great efforts in order to improve vocational education, volunteerism, and charitable activity, as well as the protection of the rights and interests of the socially vulnerable groups of population. We are ready to energize cooperation and exchange of experience with all partners in fighting poverty and in extending social welfare, so that people of different countries could feel happier and better protected.
第三，我们要坚持绿色发展，致力构建人与自然和谐共处的美丽家园。
Thirdly, it is important to stick to the course, to stay the course of green development in order to build a beautiful house of harmony of man and nature. As the great Russian writer Dostoevsky has said, beauty will save the world. Preserving the beauty of nature for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. This is the glorious mission of the people of our generation. China will never seek development at the expense of the environment. For us, green mountains and jade waters are really countless treasures, and we will continue to fight for that by means of developing green industry, emphasizing renewable energy sources, resource-saving technologies, and circular economy.
我们也将在对外合作中更加注重
In international cooperation, we will give more attention to the environmental aspect and to protecting nature. We are ready to work together to address important tasks as regards global climate change and preserving biodiversity, in particular by means of duly implementing the Paris Climate Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, friends,
发展仍然是当今时代主题。
peace and development continue to be the main theme
从
of
没有
our
像
time.
今天这样紧密相连，
The destiny of different nations is closely interrelated as never before.
深度融合。
The interests of different countries are integrating in an unprecedented way. The tendency toward peace, development, cooperation, and common benefit is irreversible.
随着逆全球化和霸权主义、强权政治
At the same time, against the background of increasing anti-globalism, hegemonism, and the policy of force, we see new problems
人类
and
再次
challenges.
站在了历史的十字路口。
Once again, mankind is at the
可持续
crossroads.
发展是破解当前全球性问题的
Sustainable development as the best
构建人类命
way
运共
out
同
of
体
the current
目标相
situation
近
is consistent with the initiative to create a community of common destiny of mankind, common values and goals. And that will be a common benefit for all mankind and for the
愿
world.
继续同各方携手努力，
China will work together with all countries. It'll be guided by the concept of sustainable development, and with all countries, it'll work
倡导多边主义，
for the future, for the common future of mankind. It'll advocate multilateralism. It'll work to improve the system of global governments. It'll work for
安宁。
for peace on our planet. And hand in hand together, we will be opening a bright and prosperous future. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо, председатель Си.
Thank you, Chairman
Президент
Xi.
Радев, прошу вас.
President Radev, I give you the floor.
Уважаема госпожо Шеварднадзе, уважаеми господа
Ms. Shevardnadze,
премиери,
Presidents, Prime Ministers,
секретар на Организацията на Обединените нации, дами и господа.
Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers and in particular President Putin for the invitation and the opportunity to attend this prestigious forum. It is a great honor for me to be in the company with President Xi Jinping. As a devoted supporter of multilateral diplomacy, I am very glad that we will be able to discuss the issues of sustainable development with Secretary General Guterres, with the Prime Ministers of Slovakia and Armenia. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum has acquired a reputation as a meeting place, as a platform where key issues of global development are discussed. The participation of the President of Bulgaria, with its 7 million population, of the Prime Ministers of Slovakia and Armenia, who sit together with two of the world leaders, is a message about the importance of one of the fundamental ideas of sustainable development. And that is the idea that this development is only achievable through the contribution of all nations. I see my participation as a recognition of Bulgaria's ability to build bridges between different regions and cultures. Sustainable development has now become the main theme of the international agenda. Some countries have benefited from globalization, while others were the losers. Our planet is being stifled by the overuse of its resources and by massive traffic in goods and products. We see how the population is increasing, whereas resources remain in short supply. The free flow of capital in the digital age without clear rules creates risks, particularly for the more vulnerable societies. Overconsumption, which has become a symbol of economic personal success, is indeed a threat to our common future. It also the undermining of international law and a transition to multi-center world generate instability. Annual growth in spending on defense is an indication that the security environment is not improving and that distrust is growing. The desire to achieve technological superiority in order to dominate politically results in science being locked in narrow geographical confines and creates gaps between states and nations, and President Putin has convincingly spoken about this. Uneven development has upset many previous concepts and has generated a new world. Who could have guessed some 20 years ago that China would become the main champion of the ideas of free trade, while the United States would seek to impose protectionism? Who could have imagined that Europe, which had been promoting for decades the model of tolerance, will today see neo-fascist and radical movements re-emerge under the pressure of social disparities and immigration. So I therefore believe that sustainable development cannot be confined solely to achieving a set of economic, social, and environmental goals that are set forth in detail in the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and also incorporated in the main policies and programs of the European Union. To overcome the existing challenges, we need to have a comprehensive approach using political, cultural, and other methods. We need to create a new supranational worldview of global citizens. The young people have already developed this worldview. We politicians cannot yet allow ourselves to have it because world politics is still the arena of competition and conflicts of nations. We need to overcome the limits of our selfishness. Our predecessors were able to overcome their contradictions, and they created the post-war global order for peace. The United Nations was the key to it, and at the dawn of the Cold War, our predecessors showed wisdom. Today, we must do the same. But this time, it is the survival of the Earth and of mankind that is at stake. The new economic paradigm must harness the capabilities of human intelligence in order to make up for the scarcity of resources. This new paradigm must emphasize knowledge, technologies, and innovations. I am convinced that what we need is a green economy based on the concept of open science, on a new consumer culture, a new production ethic that must be incorporated in the school curricula and in economic strategies. Sustainable development requires more effective global security mechanisms. They must curb the temptations to engage in unilateral actions and in the use of force. It must privilege dialogue and multilateral diplomacy that has been under pressure in recent years. It also must oppose polarization and radicalization. Sustainable development requires prevention of financial crises and more precise regulation of financial markets. We need a global consensus against corruption that has gone beyond borders, a consensus against money laundering as well as tax evasion. And we also need a certain limitation on offshore zones. I believe that these problems are well known to all political leaders, and we must show determination and common will. Sustainable development is impossible without security and social peace. Overcoming the problem of mass undernourishment has not yet happened. We've not been able to achieve genuine stability. Waves of migrations are not subsiding, and the number of refugees is increasing. Insecurity and poverty are forcing the people to migrate and at the same time fostering xenophobia and nationalism in host countries. Therefore, we need to ensure security and stability through investment in the economy, education, and healthcare in the countries of origin. Sustainable development is not possible without trust, without stable trust. Let me give you an example. 70 years ago, Bulgaria was the second country in the world to recognize the People's Republic of China and establish diplomatic relations with it. Since that time, relations between our two nations have been based on trust, in the spirit of trust and friendship, despite political changes. We can even say that since the first country that recognized China no longer exists, we may claim that Bulgaria is the first country that recognized China. Therefore, sustainable development is not just a political and economic challenge. Sustainable development is a phase in mankind's cultural evolution, and its foundation is the mutual recognition and acceptance of national cultural codes. Cultural differences greatly impact the security environment. When these differences are not understood and accepted as the others are right, they cause mistrust, they cause risks to security, and hence threats to sustainable development. It is precisely the lack of cultural communication that is at the heart of the perception of the other as adversary. I would like to quote an eminent Bulgarian revolutionary, Goce Delchev, who said more than 120 years ago, "I understand the world solely as a ground for cultural competition among nations." I note this because my country is proud of its contribution to the world's cultural heritage. A distinguished citizen of St. Petersburg, Professor Dmitry Lyukachov, called my country a state of the spirit. Indeed, it is from Bulgaria that Russia obtained its alphabet. It is from our lands that Christian religion came to Russia and the old Bulgarian Church Slavonic language. A millennium later, in 1877, it was Russia that brought to Bulgaria its freedom, for which thousands of Russian soldiers sacrificed their lives. We Bulgarians will never forget that. This is an example of how strong cultural relationship can outlive the vicissitudes of times. I recall yet another internationally known citizen of St. Petersburg, Maestro Valery Gergiev, whom I am privileged to know personally. From Beijing via Brussels to Washington, he gives evidence of the strength of the cultural domain that goes beyond borders and proves that art will overcome any division. During his recent performance in Sofia, the orchestra of the Mariinsky Theater started playing pianissimo, and the music was softer and softer, and finally the music hushed. And the people were not just listening, they absorbed every sound. And it looked as if, for the first time, we heard the quiet yet distinctive voice of each of the 150 instruments. And after the concert, I asked the maestro, how did you do it? How is it possible that we heard better and understood the quiet part than the loud one? And he answered, he said, of course, pitch is important, but music and harmony are far more important. So perhaps we politicians should tone down our speech. Less decibels. We are still far away from the harmony that our citizens expect us to provide. This would be a good beginning for us to start listening and hearing each other. The number of people wishing to become the conductor in the global orchestra is growing. Each comes with their own scores, and very often they do not even say hello to the musicians. If we want a really sustainable development of mankind, it is time for us to define clear ground rules for the music and the notes and write the music together, taking into account the specificity of each instrument in the orchestra. I think that we have a platform for this work, and that is the United Nations. As long as we don't respect this organization and use its powerful potential to strengthen its instruments and mechanisms, we will not be able to produce a melody. We will only have fragmentation, tensions, and conflicts. I wish every success to this forum, more harmony, and the achievement of the goals of the Agenda 2030.
Спасибо большое, президент Радев. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, President Radev.
I'm tempted to take advantage of this great forum and to address the world business at the forum. I highly encourage you to come and to invest in Bulgaria. I will use just one single example. And this example is the German-Bulgarian economic cooperation. 20 years ago, we started from ground zero. There was nothing. Now we have thousands of German companies operating in Bulgaria and growing and expanding in Bulgaria. Last year, we scored 8.3 billion euro trade turnover. We exported products for 4.3 billion euro to Germany. However, this is not food and wine, as many could expect. We produce in Bulgaria and export to Germany high added value products, electronics, machinery, sophisticated and complex systems and components for all types of German cars. Our capital, Sofia, is in top 10 worldwide for startup companies and IT development. So take your chance. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. У вас еще будет возможность.
Thank you very much. You'll yet have a chance to expatiate more on why business have to invest into Bulgaria. Nikol, the floor is yours. Prime Minister Pashinyan, you are invited to take the floor next. Thank you very much. President Putin, President Xi Jinping, President Radev, Prime Minister Pellegrini, Secretary General Guterres, Madam Shevardnadze. I'd like to start my remarks with the traditional words of thanks for the organization of this meeting, as well as for the opportunity that I have received to share with you my thoughts on the development of our country, as well as the goals that our government addresses with a view to achieving this goal. As of now, Armenia is going through an important period in its modern history. Amid political stability and an unprecedentedly high level of legitimacy of the authorities, the country witnesses drastic changes. The end goal of these changes is to establish a highly competitive and technologically developed economy, as well as modern society based upon the universal principles of equality, fairness, and rule of law. What is the essence of these reforms? In brief, one could say that they seek to raise the efficiency of our political and economic institutions, as well as our government institutions. Armenia is a landlocked country. It has but limited economic and natural resources. The geographic position of our country is difficult in terms of logistical corridors and geopolitical peculiarities of the region. To a certain extent, all these difficulties nudge us towards taking concrete actions on a permanent basis to raise our competitiveness and efficiency. What does it mean for us? I refer first and foremost to raising the efficiency of our government system. It is with confidence that I can say that in this particular field, we have managed to obtain some significant results. We have managed to eradicate systemic corruption. We have brought to a minimum the activities of artificial monopolies and oligopolies. However, when taking actions to clean up the economic and political environment of our country, we have encountered a problem of a fundamental nature. The judiciary, unlike the executive and the legislative powers that have seen a significant progress in improving the institutions, has not gone through any drastic transformation. As a matter of fact, this has led to a breach of trust in society with regard to the judiciary, which creates serious impediments and obstacles in the way of the country's development. All our efforts to protect the capital, to create equal conditions for economic activities and creating a favorable environment for attracting foreign investment will yield no result if the judiciary does not undergo a qualitative transformation. That is why establishing a truly independent judiciary that is free from corruption is a paramount goal for our society as well as a priority, and the reforms the government of Armenia is pursuing. Secondly, we would like to use to the full the potential of external economic ties and to participate in international integration associations. For such countries as Armenia, it is very important to institutionalize our access to the hubs of world economy and world economic activity. I refer first and foremost to our cooperation with Russia, as well as to our participation in the Eurasian Economic Union. We intend to further improve our strategic partnership with Russia and to make full use of our participation in the Union. To that end, we're going to take every effort to improve the mechanism for cooperation and to deepen as far as possible the integration between the participants of this integration association. And the same goes for our membership in the Collective Security Treaty Organization. I would like to underscore that we're interested in expanding the geographic range of external economic ties of the Eurasian Economic Union. Of particular importance is China. It is encouraging for me to say that in recent months we've managed to achieve the high dynamics in the development of our bilateral relations with China, which plays one of the leading roles in the world economy. As a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, we believe it important to foster institutional cooperation between different integration associations and projects. I believe that it is a priority to pursue the idea of linking the Eurasian Economic Union and the One Belt, One Road initiative. This linking is quite logical and rational. I also believe it promising to pursue the policy of greater cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union. Well, if not in the nearest future, then at least in the midterm perspective, such cooperation is viable and, moreover, inevitable. With the European Union, Armenia has struck an agreement with deepened and comprehensive partnership, and we intend to make full use of this agreement so as to design and implement our reforms. Our partnership with the European Union does in no way contradict our membership in the Eurasian Economic Union. It only enriches our opportunities, giving us new additional comparative advantages. Third, we have to make full use, and quite efficient too, of human capital our country possesses, because our main capital is people. So the actions of our government seek to create conditions for free self-fulfillment, fulfillment of creative, intellectual, and entrepreneurial potential of our citizens. We intend to turn Armenia into a paradise for talented people. We believe that Armenia's future lies in the region of developing our innovative economy. There is no other alternative for such a country as Armenia. Our priority is the technological sector. The transformation in this sector is of particular importance to us. From the Soviet times, Armenia has inherited a very good school in physics and mathematics, so right now we're doing everything in our power to consolidate and to use this potential. Over the last 7 years, the IT sector in Armenia has increased fivefold, turning into one of the engines for economic growth of our country. It is one of our most promising industries: education, innovation, cooperation, integration, ensuring the rule of law and efficient governance. These are our potential advantages that will give us a chance to use our resources to the full and create conditions for sustainable economic development. To be honest, we believe that we have already embarked upon this path. And Armenia has already registered a 7.1% of GDP growth, and in April, the rate stood at 9.2%. So we too invite international business to come to Armenia and to invest in our country. We have a slogan for potential investors too. We invite you to come to Armenia to become richer and to make our country richer too. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Pashinyan. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Prime Minister Pellegrini. The floor is yours, sir.
Dear Mr. President Putin, dear Mr. President Xi Jinping, dear Mr. President Radev, dear Mr. Prime Minister Pashinyan, dear Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege for me to join you today in this discussion devoted to sustainable development goals. And I am very pleased that organizers opted for this topic. And my special thanks goes to President Putin for opening the gates of St. Petersburg to world leaders and thinkers from all around the world. Thank you very much. 3.5 years ago, the international community came together in even wider setting, and we committed to work together for humanity. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals was a remarkable success. We are here to understand it is a global reference framework for development worldwide, with a clear vision and benchmarks, taking into account the fourth industrial revolution, climate change, security threats. Never before we had a universal strategy ensuring coherence among economic, social, and environmental policies. And this is the 2030 Agenda. We need everyone on board. Sustainable development is our duty towards future generations. Recent UN reports show urgent need for more progress. We have to understand that each one of us deals with the issues of sustainability on a daily basis. But the time is running out, and the chances of achieving some of our goals are already at risk. So where are the leaks? From my perspective, there are two main issues. First, on financing. The 2030 Agenda draws our attention to a number of elements which are crucial for sustainability but tend to be overlooked. We need $5 to $7 trillion global investment annually. And that's between 7 to 10% of the global GDP. A year ago, at this place, Christine Lagarde said that we are seeing storms in the forecasts. And she warned against the level and the burden of national and corporate debt, financial fragility, which will result in significant capital outflows from emerging and low-income countries, and the determination of some to rock the system that has presided over the trade relationships. 60% of global GDP is created in the private sector, so we cannot no more rely on public funding only and make forecasts on financial fragility. I see public figures here sitting next to business leaders. So let's talk on how to combine public and private resources in a meaningful way. The good news is that many businesses are willing to help out. But the bad news is only 17% of the businesses have actually introduced any relevant plans or policies to materialize this support. So clearly, we really need to make some effort here. Sustainability requires a framework for business planning and decision-making too. There is a lack of experience of Slovak companies in the development business when compared to traditional donors. But we try. The 72nd UNGA presidency under Slovakia called for a better implementation. It was our idea to host a high-level event dedicated to the topics of SDG financing. Representatives of businesses, think tanks, investment banks, and non-traditional donors came together to take stock of various initiatives and best practices in removing barriers to investment in development. You can find them assembled in the toolbox, an online repository of lessons learned on a website hosted by UNCTAD. It already contains more than 40 examples to learn from and is constantly updated. Which brings me directly to the second issue to which I would like to draw your attention, namely on communicating and networking. Unlike the Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals apply to all, not only to developing countries. But it is not for the UN alone to deliver on them. We have to change our rhetoric when communicating SDGs. We have to find a common language that enables us to communicate across cultural and geographical boundaries. We need shared responsibility for the world, stressed Chancellor Angela Merkel at the Global Solutions Summit in March this year, also emphasized by President Macron. At a time where our collective system is falling apart, sadly, it is most in demand. And I could not agree more. Interdependence has to become a driver and not an obstacle. And we need to infuse this agenda and its spirit into all areas of our work. In Slovakia, we have taken the necessary steps to integrate the 2030 Agenda into our long-term national development framework. We are going even further by linking the SDGs to our national investment plan until 2030, which should bolster financing for sustainable development. But we need a vision of where we want to have our country and the whole European Union in next 11, in the next 10, in next 20, 30 years. And we cannot implement all SDGs in all their height, width, and length. We have therefore decided to define our national priorities for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And this was done in a broad stakeholder participation process, respecting the principles and values of an open government. My country is indeed aiming at using our role, weight, and leadership in international organizations to push the SDG agenda forward. As a current chair in office of the OSCE, we are determined to help foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence in line with SDG 16. And I would like to say very clear and very loud, there can be there can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. And we support meaningful and comprehensive dialogue among states, as well as with other partners at the national, regional, and international levels. Dear President Putin, last year you called for a technological breakthrough and mentioned very importantly that we must be receptive to innovative ideas and technologies that make a difference in people's lives and determine the future of the country and the world. These are your words, Mr. President. In May 2019, Slovakia chaired the OECD Ministerial Council under the theme, Harnessing Digital Transition for Sustainable Development, Opportunities and Challenges. And the mission is to use the potential of the new digitalization era and to ensure it is for the benefit of all. In my keynote speech to the OECD Ministerial, I suggested that digital humanism needs to become a decisive philosophical orientation of the 21st century. Digital humanism means that human beings remain the central focus of the digital transformation, while digitization should be approached in its entirety and complexity for the improvement of people's lives and the preservation of our planet. Digital humanism thus seeks to enable people to achieve things they never believed possible, empowered by the use of technologies. And it is our job as policymakers that they do so, while representing the law, ethics, fundamental freedoms, democratic principles, and human rights. Slovakia, as an industrial country, also has to cope with the situation of producing in a more and more virtual world. A decade ago, a utopia. In 10 years, a reality. Just as companies have to learn how to do sustainable business, young people have to gain skills for living sustainable lifestyles. We have to bear in mind that more than 50% of the world population is under 30. Youth play a central role in development. They are actors of changes. Youth is, at the same time, actors of environmental changes. Ladies and gentlemen, the chances of achieving some of our goals are already at risk. We need action, and we need it now. And we need to stay united. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, премьер Pellegrini. Господин генеральный секретарь.
Thank you, Prime Minister Pellegrini. Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, please.
President Putin, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, I am very pleased to be making my second visit to this prestigious forum as Secretary General of the United Nations. And I thank President Putin and the people of the Russian Federation for hosting this dynamic gathering. St. Petersburg was home to many of the seminal events that marked the 20th century. And today, the St. Petersburg Forum embodies a 21st century truth. Global challenges require global solutions. No country and no organization can do it alone. And we need political leaders, the business world, scientists, scholars, philanthropists, and civil society to join hands in addressing shared threats and pursuing common opportunities. And that is why we are here. For nearly 75 years, the arrangements established after the Second World War have saved lives, advanced economic progress, upheld human rights, and prevented a third descent into global conflict and catastrophe. Yet, today, international cooperation is under immense pressure, and the values of the United Nations Charter are being challenged and undercut. Today, I would like to highlight several imperatives on which the spirit of St. Petersburg, the spirit of international cooperation, can help us prevail. First, building a fair globalization that works for all. No one can doubt the many benefits of globalization. More people have risen out of extreme poverty than ever before. More people are living longer and healthier lives. But the waves of prosperity and growth have not reached all, and there remains a vast backlog of despair. Hunger is again on the rise. Inequalities are stark, especially within countries. And levels of youth unemployment are in some parts of the world simply alarming. Discrimination against women remains pervasive, and signs of unease are everywhere we look. Growth is slowing down, and trade tensions are heating up. And financial markets become uncertain. Debt is rising, limiting what countries can do to achieve their goals and undermining their ability to act when crises strike. We need a global economy that works for all and creates opportunities for all. And the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development points the way. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are the world's agreed blueprint for building a safer, more equitable world and leaving no one behind. But we are not yet on track. And we know what works, and we have important gains to build on. And so I continue to call for more robust commitment to the world's agreed blueprint for a better future. Political support is crucial, but the business community has an absolutely vital role to play. Second, we must address the global climate emergency. We are in a race against time, and we are losing the race. In fact, the reality is proving to be worse than scientists had foreseen. We are also coming to recognize how climate impacts are accelerating the drivers of conflict, for instance in the Sahel, and even paving the way for expansion of terrorism and extremism in that region. Yet, as global warming speeds up, political will has sometimes slowed down. At a time when we know that technology is on our side, and when businesses and civil society are more and more engaged, this lack of political will could be tragic. We need a green economy, not a grey economy. We need a rapid and deep change in how to do business, how to generate power, how to build cities, and how to feed the world. That means putting a price on carbon, ending subsidies to fossil fuels. And we need to recognize that this is a race we can win, but we have the tools to tackle the climate crisis. Climate action could also yield a direct economic gain of $26 trillion compared to business as usual through 2030, according to a recent economic analysis. And that is why I'm convening a Climate Action Summit at the United Nations in September to mobilize the ambition that can reap these gains. And I'm asking leaders to come not just with speeches, but with concrete plans and commitment, including on financing. And I'm asking that they do this not out of generosity, but out of enlightened self-interest. Climate change is the most important systemic risk the world faces at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the primary roles of the United Nations is to look to the horizon and to identify emerging challenges and opportunities and bring people together to advance our collective well-being. It is in that spirit that next Monday, a high-level panel that I established last year, and which is co-chaired by Jack Ma of Alibaba and Melinda Gates of the Gates Foundation, will issue its report on recommendations on the future of digital cooperation. Technology continues to transform our world. From bioengineering to artificial intelligence to data analytics, and from education and health to e-governance and the green economy, digital technologies can turbocharge our work for the Sustainable Development Goals. Yet, as much as technology is a vector of hope, it is also a source of fear. We know there will be massive disruption in the labor markets, with an enormous amount of jobs both created and destroyed with artificial intelligence. And that is why we need a massive investment in education, but also a different sort of education, not just learning things, but learning how to learn and learning across the lifetime. And we also need a new generation of safety nets for effective social protection for the people negatively impacted. Obviously, the risks go well beyond the labor markets. We already see the crippling impact of cyber attacks, as well as the threats to privacy and violations of human rights. And the internet is simultaneously a remarkable vehicle for connecting people and a weapon for dividing them through the spread of hate speech. And while the digital age is taking ever deeper roots, nearly half of the world's population is still not online. Our shared challenge is to reduce digital inequality, to build digital capacity, and ensure that new technologies are on our side and are a force for good. Ladies and gentlemen, a new global landscape is taking shape even as age-old challenges remain. In today's world, we live with a strange paradox. The challenges we face are global and can only be addressed globally. No country alone, no organization alone can provide the solutions we need. But at the same time, multilateralism is under attack. Agreed norms are being eroded and tensions are rising. We are threatened by global warming, but also by global political warming. They are both dangerous, but they are both avoidable. It is true that we are slowly moving towards a multipolar world, and that is in itself a very positive evolution. But as history tells us, multipolarity alone does not guarantee peace. Europe was multipolar 100 years ago, but the multilateral framework for cooperation and problem solving was not there, and the result was a catastrophic world war. It is vital that the world has multilateral institutions and architecture, and that international relations are based on international law. At the same time, we need new forms of cooperation with other international and regional organizations, a networked multilateralism, and closer links with businesses, civil society, and other stakeholders with an inclusive multilateralism. And this is the kind of international system we need in the 21st century. Our shared duty for the United Nations and all of you in this room is to show that we care and that international cooperation can deliver. And that is why I'm pursuing fundamental reforms of the UN so that it can better serve the world and the people. It is why we have also launched the disarmament agenda, strengthened our response to terrorism and extremism, and will soon be launching a plan of action to combat hate speech. It is why we are fortifying peacekeeping, emphasizing conflict prevention, and pursuing a surge in diplomacy to resolve protracted conflicts that are causing enormous suffering and unsettling the world. And it is why I appeal to all of you to join with the United Nations and with each other to address the very dynamic problems we face at this time and to build the better world we know can be ours. We can also reflect more deeply on our direction as a human family when we mark next year the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and of post-war cooperation writ large. As a committed multilateralist, but also as an engineer fond of evidence and facts, I see no other way forward than to address our challenges together with all those who can contribute, working for the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. Distinguished participants, I'm going to try to do my best so that all the important issues that you've raised in your remarks, so that we can discuss them. Well, climate change has been mentioned, but it is mostly an economic forum. So let me start with the main economic news, that is the trade war between China and US. The first question goes to President Xi Jinping. China and America right now in involved in trade confrontation, but at the same time, they're so closely intertwined and they have such a great influence upon the world economy that it is very important and difficult to understand how not to endanger one's interests. And we know that Trump is a good negotiator first. He withdraws from the current agreement. He starts to play by different rules, and it creates pressure, and he gets the deal he needs. That's what happened with NAFTA. That's happened with Japan. But what is going to happen with America and you? China. Thank you. Maybe I do have some answer to this question in my notes. I don't know. Well, quite frankly, you have touched upon an issue of the relationship between globalization and the anti-globalization and the related matters. As a matter of fact, in my remarks, I have already delivered our position on globalization. I have said that we are an ardent proponent of globalization in this world. Well, China has somewhat changed its position, as it were. Objectively, it is the case. China is the greatest proponent of globalization because globalization goes in line with historical trends. That is how history is developing. Whereas anti-globalization is also a feature of today. But I think that it is but a small part of a greater wave which could bring about some minor changes, but won't be able to stop the wave of globalization as a whole. Globalization is a double-edged sword. Of course, there are those who stand to benefit and those who stand to lose. So this is a question of distribution. The distribution of benefits and interests. But, you know, if you are unhappy with fleas in your fur coat, you cannot simply throw the fur coat into the oven. This doesn't mean that because of all that is happening, you have to stick to unilateralism or protectionism, because the fundamental values do not always give a straightforward response to the interests of countries. Sometimes these fundamental values do meet the interests, sometimes they don't, but as far as the universal benefit is concerned, we have to all stick to this principle because that will bring about a harmonious world. We cannot be self-serving. And as we can see, currently, economic globalization and related issues require an immediate response. Sometimes there are disruptions in the governance of this globalization. Sometimes this machine that manages globalization starts to fail. That notwithstanding, this trend has to be protected. The current multilateral system, the trade system, has to be protected. We are not saying that we've got to start everything from scratch, that we have to overturn the established order. No, that's not what we're saying. What we are saying is we have to think how to improve the current system, the current mechanisms, what President Putin has said in his notes, in his remarks. President Putin has said that there are many countries in the world, and all of them are brothers. But there are big brothers, small brothers, and yet everyone is equal. We have to assume that everyone has to have due respect for one another when settling our differences. I'm of the view that we have to show respect for social systems and the development paths chosen by each and every country. Moreover, based on the current world order, we have to take into account new changes, such as the new economies and their role and the emerging markets that are rising. Developing countries and emerging markets have to have their voice heard. Their role in international affairs deserves respect. Only then will we be able to make sure the world develops rationally. We have always been a proponent of peaceful coexistence. Despite the divergences of views, we still have to arrive at some common ground and duly settle any differences that might arise. I do hope that such mutual respect is going to characterize our relations with each and every country. Thank you very much, President Xi. President Putin, President Xi has said that the tariff war is the confrontation between globalization and anti-globalization. I don't know whether you agree with that, but my question is as follows. Where is Russia in this confrontation? Does Russia have to choose one paradigm? The Chinese have a very good proverb. When tigers fight in the valley, the smart monkey sits aside and looks at how it's going to end. But everything changes. And this picture is also changing. But what do these changes consist of? As of now, we stick to the principles which the world used to stick to just recently. The US, it is a high-technology economy that has always preached to us the ideas of freedom of trade, democracy, and the world economic arena. But you see what is happening right now. They are trying to incorporate another practice. I said that in my remarks. When big and strong rivals emerged, and they're getting stronger, the US thinks that the old instruments serve them no longer, and that's why they resort to different kinds of restrictions, to tariff wars, tariff restrictions. Incidentally, it deals a huge blow. Yesterday, I met the heads of large investment companies, and I cited some statistics. These statistics come from international institutions, the World Bank in particular. If these restrictions grow by 2022 at the same rate, by 2022 it will have resulted in a slump of the world GDP in 2%, and the world trade is going to decrease by 17%. Of course, we are against such scenario. I'd like to remind you that in 2008, 2019, when the world financial crisis struck, the slump in the world economy was 2%, the world GDP, whereas the world trade decreased by 10%. But if everything continues as it is going on right now, everyone who is here will have run into difficulties. Colossal losses will be suffered by businesses. And all of this is going to translate on our citizens because no new jobs are going to be created. On the contrary, jobs will disappear. No more money is going to be funneled into different budgets of different levels. This is going to have a very difficult and very negative impact, and we're certainly against that. Where is Russia's place in the fight for the liberal principles and the development of economic ties? As you know, our relationship is developing with China and with other countries too, in spite of all these attempts at putting obstacles in our way. Despite all that, our trade is growing. But should these trends that we see right now persist, it is going to be bad for everyone. And yet we're trying to build our relations based on equal rights and on the principles that I've enumerated in my speech. Secretary General Guterres, this confrontation between China and America, in a sense, translates and spills over on the United Nations. The U.S. doesn't conceal, for instance, that it doesn't support Chinese initiative One Belt, One Road, because it fears that it only gives an economic advantage to China, but also a geopolitical one. You have spoken on many occasions in favor of One Belt, One Road because you think that is very useful for the third world because China gives a lot of money to infrastructure development. So what do you think this confrontation going to lead to, as well as what is going to be the policy of such an important UN donor as the United Nations? Or do you think the informal leadership in the United Nations is going to get to China?
A Spanish politician once said that politicians are the only animals that stumble twice at the same stone. And the world has stumbled into a Cold War. And we all know what a Cold War means. I think our duty is to avoid the world to fall into another Cold War. And another Cold War of two blocs that probably will then be completely separated in a monetary, in a military, but also in a trade and technology perspective. This would be extremely dangerous for us all, and we need to do everything to avoid it. And we can only avoid it rebuilding trust. And to rebuild trust, there is a first thing that is essential, to respect international law. And another thing that is essential is to contribute to multipolarity in our world. I do not see the world only as the United States and China, with all due respect for President Xi Jinping. I think it's the United States, it's China, it's the Russian Federation, it's the European Union, it's India, it's many other countries. And it is the capacity for all these countries in an equal basis to have a relationship based on equality, on trust, and on respect of international law that we can build a world that avoids this trade war, this Cold War. And I think the United Nations must be the platform that helps to make this possible. And we need to learn with the mistakes made in the past. There is no solution that one country alone can promote. There is no solution that one institution alone can promote. If we want to address the enormous challenges we face, we need serious international cooperation. And so it is my true belief that the present situation needs to be overcome and that this sleepwalking into a Cold War needs to be stopped.
Thank you, certainly, and we've got to overcome that together. There are two representatives of the European Union here. Maybe Prime Minister Pellegrini, I'm going to ask this question of you. I'd like to know what the EU thinks on what is happening, because there might be a tariff war between the EU and the US brewing. They want to slap tariffs on European cars, which is going to deal a huge blow to Europe. In case of China, we saw this conflict coming. It has deep roots. It is not today that it emerged. But in the case of Europe, which is a US ally, it seems as if it were an initiative of Trump. What does the EU think on that?
Thank you for this question. It is very difficult because not only European Union, but also Slovakia as a member of European Union would have be very strong. It would have a very strong impact on our economy also. You mentioned, for example, automotive sector. During my visit 1 month ago with President Trump, I explained him that an action against European Union and tariffs on car and industrial products would impact not just Germany, but also Slovakia, Czech Republic, and as you mentioned, it means their allies and their friends. And we also do not understand if friends are doing each other such a things. So on the other side, the offer from United States, European Union in this moment is not to increase tariffs, but to put tariffs on zero. It would even increase the business between United States and European Union, in average maybe 8 or 9 billions of euros from both sides. So it will be a nice win-win situation. So we are lucky in this moment that Mr. President postponed his decision for another 6 months. But we don't know what will be when these 6 months are over. And we hope we will not start a trade war, because it will not help even not United States. It will not just make something wrong towards European Union. It's also bad for them. And I believe that we will be able, in a normal dialogue, finish this situation in a positive way, because otherwise we will lose jobs. As President Putin mentioned, we will lose jobs. We will not have any more such economic growth, what we have now, and it will really create not a pleasant situation within the countries of European Union. So I believe into a healthy brain of all which are involved, and that will be a positive decision at the end. I hope so, but you never know.
Thank
you. President Putin, we are talking about allies. Right now, China is considered to be one of Russia's most important allies, and you meet President Xi more often than others, and the same goes for President Xi. Called you even his closest friend the day before yesterday. Important agreements were signed, and the trade between China and Russia has hit the record mark of $180 billion. But this is a record. But if we subtract commodities, raw materials from this trade, then in terms of other kinds of cooperation, military cooperation, it'll turn out that the Chinese-Russian cooperation is not that close. Why is that? Well, first and foremost, I'd like to add something to what our guest from Slovakia has said. The analysis is absolutely correct, but there is one thing I'd like to add. This uncertainty, this unpredictability in the world affairs and the world economy is the main factor that deters development. The unpredictability is getting so strong and so fast, and this is the greatest problem we're running into today. And this was a sign. I do hope that common sense, as you have said, is going to prevail. As far as our relations with China are concerned, these are not words. These are concrete measures, concrete policies. Indeed, President Xi Jinping and I have fostered very good personal ties. Yesterday, we spent a lot of time together. We talked about different issues. We said goodbye to one another only at midnight when it was 4 o'clock in the morning in China. We talked about everything. And I had to apologize to President Xi to tell him that I had to leave him because if you are a host, you cannot treat your guests like that, retaining them for so long. But only thing it demonstrates is the great agenda we've got. Yes, $180 8 billion. We wanted 100 billion, and we hit the mark of 108 billion, and our trade is only growing thanks to our joint efforts, thanks to the position of our Chinese friends and President Xi Jinping in particular. The structure of our trade has always been changing and improving too. The share of machines was growing. Last year there was a drop, but there were some factors explaining that, and we're not alarmed by that because the trends on the whole are very good. Now, the first thing about energy. Indeed, energy is one of the largest components of our cooperation.
But it also includes a lot of technologies. For example, we built an oil system going to the Pacific, and one branch goes to China. A lot of new technologies were used. China, together with the French, is also participating in an LNG project with Novatek in the north of our country. And now the Arctic project will be implemented there. And a lot of high technologies are being used there. And it also provides work for various other industries. We have excellent prospects in space, in aviation. We are now beginning to implement practically the project for a big transport helicopter. We have excellent prospects in atomic energy, in engineering for atomic power plants. And there are, of course, all kinds of high technologies there. We have already built one reactor for China. We are building 2 more and working on more. Generally in machine building, engineering, electrical engineering, all of that. We have great prospects. In Moscow the day before yesterday, our colleagues reported to us from various working groups. I think we have 11 working groups. And we were very happy that our relationship with China is so deep, as deep and as broad as with no other country in the world. And so we are, in the whole sense of that word, strategic partners. I have to emphasize this. And the important thing is that from both sides, there is a desire to make the approach to all problems an equal approach based on equal rights. That's why the Chinese have supported closer cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union. There are some complex questions there. Certain commodity groups should be discussed, and there is a big discussion and sometimes debate between our people and the Chinese partners, but we find solution. The final outcome is always a solution to the problem because we want to find a solution, and I'm quite convinced that our prospects are quite good. As for the global situation as a whole, cooperation between Russia and China on the international arena is definitely a most important factor for stability in international affairs. Trade between Russia and China, can that be a substitution, a replacement for relations between Russia and the West? Well, listen, we are not creating military alliances with China. We are strategic allies, but we are not working against anyone. We are working for the benefit of our countries and our partners. We are not substituting or supplanting anything. Our relations with the European Union have always been multifaceted. We had trade to the tune of 400 billion annually. Then it was halved, but not because of us. It was not our initiative. And now it is getting closer to 300 billion a year. Common sense is beginning to prevail. Trade is beginning to grow again. One doesn't impede the other. We are ready to work with everyone, including the United States. The volume of trade there, of course, is minimum. Under Obama, trade was 20 billion. With Trump, it's now 5 billion more, even though Trump has implemented many restrictions as regards Russia, the greatest number of restrictions against Russia. But trade is growing a bit. We are not setting anyone against anyone else. We are ready to work with everyone. Chairman Xi, I started by saying that the St. Petersburg Forum brings together leaders who perhaps would not meet anywhere else. Well, you have that dream of one belt, one road. The trade route from China to Europe cannot happen without Russia. But Russia is not a direct participant. It is linking with the one belt, one road. What does that mean for China? Will you be investing as much money in our country and in our infrastructure as you're investing in other participating countries?
这个“一带一路”啊，现在搞得越来越热闹了。
Indeed, One Belt, One Road is the initiative that is becoming more and more dynamic. Initially, it was something very simple. 6 years ago, I proposed that initiative, and first in Astana, we discussed the idea of the one economic Silk Road, and then I proposed the Sea Road. The initial idea was simple. We just wanted to use the historical memory and the experience of dynamic exchanges between different countries, and to energize that dynamic, that tradition in today's world. That's why I proposed this initiative. We had some excellent response. The Silk Road in ancient times included just a limited number of routes. But today, most countries have expressed a willingness to participate in this initiative. So we signed an agreement within the framework of this initiative with over 130 countries and about 30 international organizations. So this result has already exceeded the achievements of the ancient Silk Road. And so the initiative is extending to many, many countries throughout the world, including Latin America and South Pacific. This year, we have organized the second Belt and Road Summit. During the first summit, we invited heads of state and government from just 29 countries, and of course also heads of international organizations, including Secretary General Guterres. This year, more participants wanted to come, and we invited more than 30 heads of state. We invited also Mr. Guterres, and we invited the head of the IMF. The hall was full to capacity. We could not invite more. It was overflowing, just like this conference hall is. And that shows that this is a mutual attraction. We stick to the principles of joint action, joint discussion, joint implementation, and joint use. And this idea belongs not just to China. This will bring benefits to all. And those countries that initially were not willing to participate, who were saying that perhaps this is a kind of Chinese version of a Marshall Plan. Well, we say that we don't want that. We don't want to dominate. We do not have such plans. And perhaps Initially, some participants stated that this is a kind of colonization plan, but we never were interested in colonization. Since ancient times, China never wanted to go for that. We are ready to work on the basis of the principles of mutual benefit, and this is what we base our decisions on. It is based on that principle that we have worked together with our good neighbor Russia, and we signed contracts, agreements to the tune of more than $20 billion, and President Putin and I had one-on-one meetings and then delegation meetings, and we never had enough time. We always discuss problems more and more intensively. Our contacts are becoming deeper, and that's why we want, by means of linking up the One Belt, One Road and the Eurasian projects, this makes it possible to build gradually to shape a community of common destiny, and I'm sure that this dream will be coming true. Thank you very much. Let me add, Mr. Guterres and I attended the recent forum, One Belt, One Road conference in Beijing, and I think he will confirm what I'm going to say. First of all, I noticed that all the principal important players were present. The European Union was represented by various countries at different levels, but practically all leading EU countries were present. And then a second thing that I noticed, and I think the Secretary General will confirm that, perhaps this is because of the way my good friend, Mr. Xi Jinping, operates, or perhaps this is China's philosophy. We saw that they are not forcing anything on anyone. They're not imposing. They are proposing. And in the initial stage, the investment is $120 billion in various spheres. 70 have already been invested. As for Russia, in the Far East alone, only in the territories of advanced development or anticipated development, we have created about 100 enterprises, and we have already 13,000 jobs that have been added. As for linking up with the Eurasian Economic Union and the Chinese Belt and Road, we have specific joint projects. For example, there is a road from China to Kazakhstan. It's an infrastructure project. We will also build our own automobile road to Kazakhstan to link up. We are a little late. The Kazakhs have already done this, but there are other specific projects, specific plans, which we will be implementing, and I'm sure that we will be implementing them quite successfully. Thank you. I will again return to the One Belt, One Road, Mr. Radev, and I will also ask you how to integrate Europe and the Eurasian Economic Union. We've been talking about Chinese investment, but we have here investors from throughout the world who have been investing in Russia or would like to invest in Russia. There was this situation recently with Michael Calvi and his partners who have been taken into custody. You have been saying everywhere that the law enforcement bodies and special services should not interfere too much in commercial disputes. You have said that the law is our #1 priority. Calvi is now under house arrest. Philip Delpen is in custody. This has shocked investors. And I will tell you honestly, it seems like you're saying one thing, but you're doing something different. Should people really believe you or the special services? Well, they should look at the Russian legislation, at the Russian law in all that you are doing. And that concerns government, that concerns business, Russian business, and international business as well. I understand what you're talking about. I, too, am concerned. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been mentioning it in my remarks today. But everyone should respect the law. When we say that the law enforcement bodies must not interfere in the life and in the fabric of business and in the operations of business in an unjustified way, this is our position. But it also means that all participants in this process, including business, must also work consistently with the law. Whether law was violated, it is said he's been accused of stealing 2.5 billion rubles. There are people present here, including his Russian partners, who are saying that that is not true. Perhaps, but it's for the law enforcement system and the judiciary system to sort things out and to find the truth. I very much hope that everything will be done transparently and clearly with the participation of those who defend this American partner, and that fair and legitimate decisions will be taken. And certainly I and my colleagues will follow the events. The General Prosecutor, Mr. Chaika, will follow this, and it will be done under his control. As for who is under house arrest and who is still in custody, our French friends asked me about that. Well, it's just a question of who has a house in Moscow, an apartment in Moscow, and who doesn't. So how can he be placed, that other person placed under house arrest? But I'll think about it. As for humanization of all these procedures, well, we will be moving in that direction. And if it is at all possible not to jail a person when there's a need for investigation of a particular situation, we'll certainly try and do that. And we will be moving in that direction in the near future in order to humanize these processes. Okay, well, it's not for me to justify anyone. Some of the people who are your friends and very respected people have defended Calvi, but I have said that the Calvi case really have caused a lot of strain for many people. Calvi has been working in Russia for 15 years. Does it mean that he doesn't understand the ground rules? What will happen? The potential investors think, what will happen to me when I come to Russia? Well, read the Bible. Do not steal, do not want your neighbor's wife, etc. 2.5 billion rubles is what he's being accused of stealing, and either this is proven or he is exonerated. Look at what is happening in other countries. American businessmen sometimes get sentences of 100 years of jail, 150 years of jail. Well, because do not steal. Behave decently, and nothing bad will happen. But once again, we will follow this very closely. And let me say, there is a general rule in law, and that is a person is considered innocent until proven guilty, including Mr. Calvi. He is considered innocent at this time, and I hope that every procedures will be implemented properly, and in accordance with the Russian law, it will be public, it will be transparent, and the Office of the General Prosecutor will follow this very closely. Mr. Radev, I would like to ask you and Mr. Pellegrini, as people representing EU countries, again, about the One Belt, One Road initiative. It was mentioned here that work should be done as a common front, but perhaps for Bulgaria it would be better to have a direct agreement with China on this rather than EU.
Already 17 countries on board. We also support One Belt, One Road initiative, but we need to be more effective and more efficient when we work together. We need to know more about each other. Last year, the Prime Minister of China, Li Keqiang, visited Bulgaria. When he was in my office, we started discussing all the untapped opportunity and potential behind this initiative. And I told him, okay, you are going to invest in Europe. we are going to work together, but let's open a center for global partnership for this initiative in Sofia. Why? Because we need feasibility studies for all the projects. We need to optimize them. We need to establish clear criteria how to have better efficiency, how not waste money on something which is not worth to do, but to allocate the money for some other activities. Also, we need more information about our legislation. We need information to provide information to China about EU procedures and rules and tenders, everything. So this idea was taken into consideration. It was proposed at the summit of all the prime minister participation in Sofia in July last year. And very soon we are going to open this center in Sofia. It is a clear example that we are going forward, and we have great expectations behind this initiative. Of course, there are some concerns in some countries western from the members of the initiative, but if we compare the volume of China investment in UK, in Germany, there is a huge investment in those countries. So we should not be concerned. Of course, we should obey all the clear rules for transparency and competition, and we are going to help.
So would like to directly agree with President Xi or act in a single front with the EU?
To discuss those problems, of course. Bulgaria has its national interests. We are highly interested in China initiatives, in China investment, in mutual projects, so of course we are ready.
Thank you, Prime Minister Pashinyan. This year, Armenia presides in the Eurasian Economic Union. It is a small, but I like to add, an absolutely magnificent country. And it can coordinate vast economies spanning hundreds of kilometers. And as you have said, recently Armenia has signed an association agreement with the EU. So far, it does not contradict your work in the Eurasian Economic Union. But if you move closer to the EU, do you not expect Brussels to tell you to quit the Eurasian Economic Union? Well, thank you for the question. First, I'd like to tell you that there is no movement towards the European Union, because Armenia stays where it is. And it is very important to state this fact, because as I have previously mentioned, we cooperate with the European Union on issues related to our internal reforms. I'd like to underscore that the EU is deeply interested in better relations with the Russian Federation. I certainly talk to different European leaders, and I should like to say that all of them support Armenia in its aspiration to develop its relations with Russia. And this is a nuance that is very important. In relations with the EU, we are absolutely transparent before our Russian partners. And in our relations with Russia, we are transparent before our European partners. Apart from some nuances, some issues that are related to security, I'd like to add that indeed There are many European leaders who are interested in normalizing relations with Russia. And I think that the presence of two European leaders at this forum is testimony to that. Very many all across the world have come to realize that the geopolitical games benefit no one, especially those countries and peoples that become the battlefield for these geopolitical games. So Armenia's position is absolutely clear. We do not intend to play these geopolitical games. What we intend to do is develop normal relations with Russia. Yes, indeed, we do participate in the Eurasian Economic Union, and currently we are chairing it. Recently, I have paid a visit to the People's Republic of China, and in my speech there I said that I was very glad that we had very good dynamics in our relations with China. What makes these relations interesting to us is that I think China, Russia, the EU, everyone is interested in global stability. And I think for us, in these relations, the most important interest is to ensure global stability and security. As a country that is part of the Eurasian Economic Union, we realize our role, and we shall certainly make sure that relations between our partners get better, not worse. Well, of course, in this particular regard, our instruments we have at our disposal are not that great. But what we can, we will do. We'll make our own contribution to global security, stability, and cooperation. Well, I'd like to clarify. Do I understand correctly that Armenia has made a choice in favor of the Eurasian Economic Union? We are a member of the Eurasian Economic Union. Yes, I know that. It is an integration process, an economic integration process, the only one we are part of. And we are going to continue our participation, and we're going to develop our relations within this integration process. But this doesn't preclude us from having relations with China, bilateral relations with China. And apart from that, we will also try to help the relationship of China and the Eurasian Economic Union develop. And what about the EU? Well, as far as the EU is concerned, we are cooperating. I have spoken about judicial reforms in our country. For us, it is very important to set up such a judiciary that is going to be on par with European standards. And I think this is a very good goal. Because when I say the European standard, I mean a truly, genuinely independent judiciary that is not corrupt, that is free of political influence. But as far as other things are concerned, we are very glad to have an opportunity to contribute towards the improvement of relations between the EU and Russia. And I think that Armenia could become sort of a bridge in certain cases between the EU, Russia, and China and Iran. As you're aware, the Eurasian Economic Union has signed an FTA agreement with Iran, and we believe that in this context, Armenia can play and will play a key role. President Putin Armenia thinks that it can play an important role in rapprochement between the Eurasian Economic Union and the EU, but so far we see that any rapprochement with the West is accompanied by tensions in relations with Russia. So far, compromise has not been found. You say that very often the rules of the game are violated. This is because the world is changing and the rules that exist, well, I would like to say that the rules that exist simply lag behind the changes the world is going through. As far as I understand, the Eurasian Economic Union and the EU, if you cannot integrate both of them, you write the rules, well, to a certain extent, for the Eurasian Economic Union. Can you do something to prevent countries from having to make this choice, to burn the bridges to one organization to the other? You know, Charles de Gaulle used to speak about a common space from Portugal to the Urals. Afterwards, I said it had to be extended to Vladivostok. There are no big differences. There are some concrete issues that have to be taken into account amid the current realities when integration processes are happening. These integration processes, and that is very important, are inevitable. They happen all across the world, and we are part of these global trends. And it's only natural that we band our efforts together with the former Soviet Union countries. We have one culture and one language, and it creates some natural competitive advantages. That goes without saying. But there are some issues we've got to overcome to surpass embarking upon this development path. Say the cooperation with the EU. Well, let's take the technical regulations. They're different in the EU and here. These are some concrete issues. What's the pressure of snow? It's some kilos here and some kilos there, simply because we have more snowy winters. And we cannot simply make our industries comply with European technical standards in the blink of an eye. Yes, I understand, and I recognize that in some regards, European standards are better than we have, but our standards sometimes are even tougher in or sanitary norms, and that's why when at question is the access of their products to our market, we ask them to comply with our regulations. Sometimes they comply, sometimes they don't want to, because it's easier for them to export like that their products to our market. And we'd like to tell them that you cannot simply decide that on a unilateral basis. Sometimes we say that, yes, we are ready to comply with European standards, but it takes money and time. You've got to re-equip, you've got to invest hundreds of billions and millions of dollars, and you cannot do that in the blink of an eye either. And our partners have to understand that and treat that with understanding. When we had some negotiations with them on their neighbors, we tell them that we needed 15 years or so to catch up with them, and several industries. But, you know, it didn't result in anything. And the European Commission was willing to talk to each and every country of the Eurasian Economic Union separately, but they didn't want to talk to the Eurasian Economic Union as a whole. But so far we see that they're willing to talk to this organization, not just to separate countries. You know, we've just been to Nur-Sultan, former Astana, and we said that the Eurasian Economic Union is seeing an increase in trade. I'm not going to cite any statistics, lest I should make a mistake. But our trade with third countries, of each and every separate country of the Eurasian Economic Union, has grown even more. What does it tell us? It tells us that when we comply with common rules that are in compliance with the WTO rules, it becomes more reliable and easier to cooperate with each and every one of our countries. That has given an additional impetus to the cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union countries with third countries, and we only welcome that. There are no contradictions there. The only thing we need is goodwill to overcome natural barriers, and we are willing to do just that, and we'll be pleased to do that. If you'll allow me, I'd like to add something. Just have a look. We are discussing this One Belt, One Road initiative, this project. And in this project, there is no choice between choosing between the Eurasian Economic Union or One Belt, One Road project. For Armenia, in other cases, this question does arise. Say, if the infrastructure develops in Armenia and in our region as part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, this will help integrate Iran, Armenia, and Georgia. And if this happens, this will further serve the development of the Eurasian Economic Union. If a participant of the Eurasian Economic Union, Armenia in particular, becomes a more developed country, more advanced, with a well-developed political, economic system and a good judiciary, this will only benefit the Eurasian Economic Union. Moreover, this will improve the brand, the image of the Eurasian Economic Union. I would like to remind you of what President Putin has spoken about. He said that it is important to remember that every country has its specifics. What's possible in Russia is impossible in Armenia. What's possible in Armenia is impossible in China. What's impossible in China is impossible, for instance, in Bulgaria. But what we've got to concentrate on is the values that bring us together. And I think there are many values that unite Armenia with Russia, and these values are unwavering. Thank you, Prime Minister Pashinyan. President Putin, well, it's been said that there are no big differences between the EU and the Eurasian Economic Union. What is needed is goodwill and time. But Ukraine is a vivid example of how one country split between these two poles of attraction. In this context, I'd like to ask, why didn't you congratulate Vladimir Zelensky on his election as president? Well, you see, it still sticks to some rhetoric. He calls us a foe, an aggressor. He has to make a decision on what he intends to achieve, to do. We do not refuse contacts. We're going to work with, well, you are president of a big country, and Vladimir Zelensky is well loved in his country. He has a great ranking. You have no previous relations with him. One simple gesture can change the situation for the better drastically. Why not meet President Zelensky without conditions? Well, I didn't refuse to meet him. No one simply suggested that. Are you willing to meet with him? Well, I do not know him. I do hope that sooner or later we'll get acquainted. As far as I understand, he's a good specialist in the field he used to work before. He's a good actor. Well, I'm saying that on a serious note, and you're laughing. Well, it's one thing to play some part, and another thing to be that. To play a part, you need talent. That is indubitable. And one of these talents is the talent of changing your persona. You can change your persona every 10 minutes. the beggar or the prince, and you've got to be convincing in both parts. Then this is a true talent. But to deal with affairs of state, other qualities are required. Experience, namely certain knowledge, and you've got to be able to identify the most important issues, to see them, to find tools that would allow you to address these issues. You have to be able to gather professional people together, forge a team, to foster good relations, believe in them, give them a chance to think freely, to come up with decisions and solutions, to make a choice of these decisions, to explain the motivation behind your decisions to millions of people. And the most important thing, to have the courage, to have the mettle to assume responsibility for the consequences of such decisions. I'm not saying that Mr. Zelensky is devoid of these qualities. Maybe he has them, maybe experience is what is lacking, but, well, as they say, experience comes fast. But whether he has the other qualities I've told you about, I don't know that. Maybe he does. So far, he has not shown himself, as it were. But what we are seeing is statements of a contradictory nature. In the electoral campaign, he said one thing, afterwards another. So we'll live and see.
And again, I'm not saying that he has done nothing or that he has spoiled everything by his remarks. We'll have to see. I wanted also to ask you about Belarus. Armenia is currently chairman of the Eurasian Union, then Belarus. You have been meeting with Alexander Lukashenko in Sochi, then in Nur-Sultan. There's a lot of talk about unification of Russia and Belarus. A lot of talk or a bad talk? No, a lot of talk about unification of the two countries, and that it is somehow related to 2024. Is there any truth to that? No. And there can be any truth to that. And let me tell you why. Because history has so evolved that our one nation, and I believe that Belarusians, Russians, and Ukrainians are one nation. I've said that many times. I believe that. I'm convinced that that is the case. Because Ukraine, there was a time when it didn't exist. The Zaporozhye Sech was included in the empire. They did not come as Ukrainians. But if you look at the history, at language, and at religion, all regarded themselves as Russians. Then Ukraine means at the edge of the empire. Krai means edge. Proximity to European culture, to the Catholic world, partial inclusion of those territories in the Catholic Poland. So some people decided that they wanted to be closer to that part of Europe. It's a legitimate desire. There is nothing offensive about that. Before the First World War, the countries that were preparing for war against Russia were developing the idea of Ukrainian identity. They wanted in that way to shake up the potential enemy. They wanted to get something from him. And so that idea was picked up, and a part of the population developed their own identity. And this is a natural process. We respect and understand that. The same with Belarus. My conviction is that we are still one nation that live in different countries, different states that emerged. I have said that many times, but today there is absolutely no reason for state unification. We do not have such plans or goals. We have a plan of building a so-called union state, because I'm convinced that our people want that. and a lot had been done, including in the social sphere, labor rights, and freedom of movement. So, on the other hand, the Eurasian Union has outpaced our Union state already. On the other hand, some of the things that are in the Treaty of the Union state has not been done. And I and Lukashenko discussed whether perhaps some of the things that have not been done could be done now, or add things that are of relevance today. So this is what we were discussing in a very constructive way, in a very friendly way, and maybe it's our fault that we do not provide sufficient information to the media and to the public about this. Had we provided fuller information, there would be no rumors. Well, then it's good that I asked you. Well, it's good that you are here and that you're asking questions. Mr. Radev, I would like to ask you a question about investment and projects. Bulgaria wanted to implement the South Stream project in its territory, but then under pressure from Brussels, it decided not to do so. I know that you were not president at that time, but certainly know more about it than I do. So what were the motives of Bulgaria when they decided to abandon that project? Now they are discussing a project with Turkey, and it could branch out to your territory. Will you be able this time to defend your interests and to overcome the skeptical attitude of your European partners?
President Putin has just mentioned something very important: to be able to take responsibility for your own decisions. So I can take responsibility for my own decisions. At that time, I was not at that position. So I will not go back to history, but not to forget, Bulgaria is part of EU, and Bulgaria develops its energy policy based on the energy policy of European Union, which means diversification of routes, sources and suppliers, security of supply and competitiveness. Of course, Bulgaria and Russia, we have been strong strategic partners in the field of energy for decades. Bulgaria is 100% dependent on Russian gas, on Russian nuclear technologies and fuel for our nuclear power plant. And we had very fruitful discussion with President Putin and his team yesterday about how to continue our strategic cooperation for the future. Because there are some changes in Bulgaria, there are changes on the European gas market, on the European map for gas supply. Bulgaria has been modernizing and expanding its gas transitioning network. We are building reverse capabilities. Also, we have initiated interconnector between Greece and Bulgaria for LNG gas supply. And all this means that Bulgaria is developing a capability for gas distribution center and establishing its own gas exchange capabilities. This provides more opportunity for Russia to deliver more gas to Bulgaria and to change the direction. So this gas could flow to Central Europe through Bulgaria, which is a good opportunity for Russia. Of course, we also need to, this is my opinion, we discussed this yesterday, we need to transform also our relations in how to contract, how to deal with price of gas deliveries, because there are new changes, I said, on the market. We have two approaches. One is fixed long-term prices for pipeline gas, and the other approach is more flexible prices coming from LNG capabilities, yet they are very limited. For today they are limited, but They are already on the market, so I hope we will find the best approach to meet our interests and to continue being strategic partners in energy.
Я буквально два слова скажу.
Let me say just a couple of words. Mr. President mentioned the problem of price formation. Let us talk a little bit more about economic issues. He said that there is a long-term fixed price and there is a more flexible way. I will make a comment with your permission. Long-term price is not fixed price. It is attached to a kind of energy product basket, particularly to crude oil, and depending on fluctuations in oil prices, oil gas price also fluctuates. It's a fair and market formula pricing. It doesn't mean that that formula should be there forever. We are ready for discussion, but certainly the discussion should be between business entities. As for the South Stream project, many people in Bulgaria regret that it didn't happen, and I am putting it very mildly. Many people. What did Bulgaria lose? It lost $3 billion in investment, thousands of new well-paid jobs, and $400 million income revenue from transit. That is it, and that's a direct loss to the Bulgarian economy, and that is quite regrettable. Why did it happen? I think we understand, let's say it frankly, there are certain problems in the Western integration system. You mentioned that, and that means also limitation of sovereignty. In the Eurasian Union, we don't have that. We sometimes argue the whole night through, but never there is a decision without a consensus. This causes problems, but in the European Union, that's not always the case. I'll repeat that. Today, the European Parliament adopts decisions that are mandatory throughout the territory of the European Union, more so than the Supreme Soviet of the USSR with respect to the republics. So there are problems in the European Union, and that's why things are rather complicated in the EU now. But let's talk also about the new routes for diversifying supplies of raw materials to Europe from Russia. We've been working on North Stream 2 for many years. South Stream had to be put aside. We agreed with Turkey to build the Turkish stream because of the political will of President Erdogan, because he showed the greatest manly qualities and showed the country's sovereignty. We will soon be completing it in the coming months. So the sea part has been built, and we are now working on the land territory, and will soon complete that. Now our European partners will be getting our gas from a different route, if they want to, of course. But I think that Southern Europe has an interest in that. I'd like to repeat once again that pipeline gas from Russia, in terms of distance and volume of supply, always, by definition, will be cheaper than LNG from outside, and that'll always be the case. I think that experts know, it's not a big secret, and that is the profitability of production. It's a lot less than the production, liquefaction, and then the delivery and regasification. I mean, you have to multiply by 0, and there is really a margin for the price. But the price has to be fair, both for the seller and for the buyer. Thank you.
Talking about sovereignty limitations, of course, President Putin has its point of view, but I cannot agree that Bulgaria doesn't have sovereignty, because South Stream was not a project just for Bulgaria. It's a pipeline going through Bulgaria to other EU countries. So canceling South Stream was a collective European decision. It was not sole Bulgarian decision. This should be clear. And of course, I fully agree as well that there is a fixed formula, very complex one for calculating the price of the gas. It's called Netherlands formula. I don't know why, but the name is that. What I'm talking is to be more flexible and to look beyond today, because there is a huge change and we need to find again the best solution for our two countries.
This is exactly what we will be doing, Mr. President. You're right. I agree. Thank you very much. Vladimir Putin used the word unanimously. You also used the word unanimously. So a question to you, President Radev, and to you, Premier Pellegrini, about sanctions. Very often, European leaders say that, well, sanctions need to be lifted because they are bad for everyone, not only for Russia. But sanctions are extended every year. Can you afford voting not to extend sanctions, because sanctions are extended unanimously? Yes or no?
There is a position of European Union, and Slovakia is a part of European Union, so in general we support. But there is also the position of the Slovak Republic. And to be honest, we do not think that sanctions are helping somebody, even not European Union and even not to the Russian Federation. It's the opposite. The exchange between our two countries or groups went down, as President Putin mentioned, and now we are happy that it slowly is going up again. And Slovakia always prefers dialogue and communication and not sanctions at the first point. So, but in general, that is the position of European Union. There is now negotiations or discussion how long they should still continue. But I will again repeat, as a Prime Minister of Slovak Republic, it's better to sit around the table and to find solutions than to fight against each other with sanctions.
Well, everyone thinks so, but sanctions are extended. Can you vote against extension of sanctions?
Prime Minister represents Bulgaria in the European Council. But anyway.
If you were voting,
this question goes a little bit far beyond sustainable development, but it's an interesting one. Being an EU member, Bulgaria is a part of the EU understanding and position that sanctions are a policy-changing tool, trying to de-escalate the tension when there is a conflict. However, everyone who plans to impose sanctions should think about pros and cons and consequences. Sanctions, they like a coin with two sides. And the business here knows very well that business can suffer from sanctions, in some areas heavily. Sanctions are not fair because they do not hit the politicians, but they affect ordinary people. And sanctions could be circumvented, and I will tell you from our experience that sanctions could lead to black marketing, illegal trafficking, organized crime. We know this from experience during the sanctions upon former Yugoslavia. And one who plans and contemplates sanctions should calculate very well the outcomes, because sometimes the real outcomes are different from the planned effect. And they could hit back to those who planned and impose sanctions.
Sorry, but I always like to say what I'm thinking in this moment, and really I have to say, it looks sometimes very, very funny when the biggest supporters of sanctions and who are fighting for sanctions against Russian federations, the other day are looking how they can sell their goods in Russia and how they can invest in Russia and to grow up their own business. So it's for me sometimes very, very funny how some people are behaving.
А вот в этом я ничего плохого не вижу.
Well, I see nothing wrong with this. Gentlemen, we've gone really far beyond the subject of our forum. And to conclude, I would like to do a blitz poll, a quick poll. You have said that, in principle, the existing ground rules of world trade make everyone unhappy. China is not happy, America is not happy, the EU, Russia. Mr. Guterres, you have also said that there needs to be some change. And from all of you, each of you, I would like to hear a specific proposal. What needs to be changed? Because everyone is unhappy, but no one wants to really work for change. So let us start with you, Mr. Pashinyan. You would probably integrate the European Union and the Eurasian Union. Well, the situation is such that everyone is unhappy, but we need to do something to make everyone happy. And there is just one way to do so, and that's a compromise. And we need to work to develop a compromise. In order to achieve a compromise, we need mutual respect. We need, as Vladimir Vladimirovich has said, understanding of one another's interests and respect for those interests. If all global players work on that basis in this situation, if they're all ready to assume responsibility for compromise, then understandably, of course, it's not easy, but that's the only way to go, because all other paths could lead us to very big problems.
President Xi, what would you change? You have said that there is a wave of anti-globalization that is detrimental to the freedom of trade. What would you change in the current system of trade so that freedom of trade does not suffer, so that we do not slide back to protectionism and isolation? Well, I would like to be not the breaker of things, but a creator of things. What exists has to be respected. And we've got to improve what we have, not overturn it. We cannot supplant it with anything. I'm not trying to undermine what we have and cause trouble for others. What I have always been doing is be friends with all countries, and we have to expand the circle of friends for China. Everywhere in the world, I see friends of China. Only friends. To cite an example, Russia is a great neighbor of ours, and the Eurasian Economic Union too. We are working together. We are also working together with the EU, and we are strategic partners. Right now, we work in the 17+1 format. And we are constantly developing our relations with ASEAN and with Africa too. With Africa, we have established a cooperation mechanism with the majority of African states. As far as Latin America is concerned, we have similar mechanisms too, as well as with the countries of the Southern Pacific. We have good relations. Now, as for the US, Well, yes, there are some frictions, trade frictions, but still China and the US are very closely intertwined. We have big investors investing in one another. We've got trade, and a big one. On an everyday basis, around 10,000 people fly from China to US and vice versa. And it would be difficult to conceive a complete rupture between China and the US. That is not within our interest, nor is it in the interest of the US. President Trump is a friend of mine, and I'm confident that he is not interested in that rupture either. President Putin, what would you change? Any concrete proposal? Well, I think almost everything has been said here. Based on compromise, we have to seek common solutions, come up with unified rules, and we have to stick to the norms of international law, what as Mr. Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, has spoken about. President Radev, what would you say?
I think it is not about economy, it is not about trade war, it's about global security. Because trade wars, they touch the deepest layers of our security architecture. I can understand trade war between United States and China. I can understand trade war between United States and Russia. But I cannot understand trade war between United States and Europe. When last year in May trade war blasted, some of the European leaders were so frustrated that they started talking that Europe must take its security in its own hands. For a short time period, you can put in one basket, because economy and defense, they're in one basket, trade war and being ally. But it is impossible to be in the same basket, ally in defense and rival in economy. For the long run, you will split. If we split, that will have a devastating effect on the transatlantic bond and the whole European and world security architecture. I hope that we'll find very soon feasible solution to fix that problem.
Pellegrini.
Prime Minister Pellegrini.
I think there is a crisis of multilateralism in this moment in the world, so I think we should come back and to act again according to the international rules, to support the international organizations such as United Nations and World Trade Organizations. I think this is the best what we can do to come back and to respect international rules and not to fight against each other.
Mr. Secretary General, let me reformulate a little bit this question to put it in the UN context. In your remarks, you have said that many political processes are happening outside of the UN. But what about these good changes? Could they take place under the UN aegis? If you had the latitude to take drastic decisions, how would you reform the organization that you are the head of currently?
Well, first of all, we are reforming the UN in what we can do to reform the UN, and it is essentially to make the Secretariat and the coordination among agencies more transparent, better coordinated and more accountable. But of course there are central questions in the UN related to the way the Security Council works, the General Assembly works. But looking at the UN or looking at the World Trade Organization or any other organization, everything can be reformed. And I'm very much in favor of reform, of improvement. By the way, the World Trade Organization has a reform process taking place. The central question for me is related to the behavior of the actors. And that is where the major change is needed. And the first change is to establish trust in international relations. And to establish trust, there are things that are absolutely essential. First, behaviors need to be rational and need to be predictable and need to be in line with international law. if we are able to do these things, we can reform the institutions, we can make them better. If we are not able to do these things, there is no way we will be able to reform the institutions because we will never agree on the way to do it. So let us re-establish trust. Let us make sure that key actors in the world act in a way that is rational, that is predictable, and if that happens, we will be able to improve the way our organizations work in a fantastic way. But let's never forget, everything is important, but the most important is people, the people that is assuming responsibilities and the way they are able to shape international relations based on trust.
I promise we have completed everything, but I've got a geopolitical question that goes to President Xi and President Putin. Well, I'm a journalist specialized in international affairs. I talked to Margarita Simonyan, my boss. Well, she got in the hospital. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here. The question I'd like to ask is the North Korean peninsula, she went to hospital, yes, but she's pregnant, and I have nothing to do with that. Well, yes, Kim Jong-un came to Trump, then, but unfortunately the talks didn't bring about anything. He came to Russia. But everything boils down to the following. What can guarantee a tranquil life for the head of North Korea but the nuclear bomb? Well, you, President Putin, have said that international guarantees would help break the deadlock. So if everyone agrees, why not do that? There are two big nuclear powers, China and Russia, and you're willing to give guarantees. You can ask President Trump if he is willing to join these guarantees to be provided to North Korea. Well, indeed, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is an international agreement. And this fixes the gazes of the whole world, and in particular the dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington. I believe that we need to ensure the prospects of this dialogue because the parties concerned are engaged in close coordination, in particular myself and President Putin, and we are, well, interested in a solution. And we work together on the North Korean and the Korean Peninsula issues. And together we play a positive role in promoting the process of political settlement. One would say that we have to have confidence in this process and continue to further the process of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. We're confident that the opportunities are there, the chances are there, but the most important thing to do right now is to band our efforts together. Of course, different mechanisms could be set up so as to remove trust, to remove mistrust between the main parties concerned. This trust is something we are aspiring to do, and we have to talk about these solutions together. Thank you. President Putin, the issue of the North Korean nuclear program is very important, not just for the region, but for the whole world. And I agree completely on that matter. Together with our Chinese friends, we are paying a great deal of attention to that. I'd like to confirm what President Xi Jinping has just said. The principal role is to be played by the countries between which the dispute exists, that is, North Korea and the US. North Korea does stick to some obligations that it has committed itself to. North Korea has seized its nuclear tests. It is dismantling one of the testing grounds. But we hear our American partners say that this is not sufficient. Maybe that is not sufficient, but this is something they had agreed upon. On the other hand, we have to think about the mechanisms to ensure security of North Korea. Of course, North Korea says the example of Iraq or Libya, and they do not be next in line. And we cannot blame them for that. We have to treat this matter seriously. What kind of guarantees this might be is a very difficult matter. I'm not going to conceal this is not a big secret. Yesterday evening we talked about this matter in particular. I do not have a response to this question right now. And I think no one so far has any proposals as to how to achieve that. Yes, we talked about Americans with that. Mr. Pompeo came and we spoke about that too. But of course, everyone, China, Russia, are interested in the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We want that because the proliferation of WODs across the planet breeds additional risks which we tend to forget in our everyday lives. But these risks are still there and they are growing and they cannot but be a source of concern. How to address these risks is something we all have to think about. But what Mr. Secretary General has said, the most important thing is trust. And we've got to come up with a scheme, a model. Right now, the process is following the roadmap formulated by Russia and China. On the whole, we are satisfied with how the process is unfolding. But I am hopeful that President Trump and the leader of North Korea are going to be able to re-establish contacts and move the process further in the nearest future. And we're going to facilitate this process as far as we can. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. I'd like to wish each and every one of you success at your endeavors. That's all for today. Have a nice evening. And we would like to wish the best to Margarita. Please pass my best wishes to her.